All right, welcome back to the Nets and Net podcast. I'm your host, Sam Kelty, and today we're going to talk about our NFL podcast edition. So today we'll kind of run through this week's games, as well as talk about who I think will be on the move and which players could be candidates for trade. So my first, to start off this week, is the Bills versus Buccaneers. I think the Bills will look for a bounce back week. They've struggled over the last few games against New York, Jacksonville, New England for the last 3 weeks. I think playing Tampa Bay should be a bounce back week. I look to see Josh Allen be better at taking care of the ball, not turning it over as much. On Sunday, we have Dolphins Patriots, which I like the Dolphins. Dolphins will have a bounce back game again against as they took that loss to Philadelphia, which I thought was going to be a lot closer. But we will see another Alabama quarterback matchup between Mac Jones and Tua Tagovailoa. If this is the Mac Jones that played last week against Buffalo, I think Patriots have a chance. But if it is the Mac Jones that we saw for the first 4 weeks, look for the Patriots to struggle and Dolphins take advantage. It's just, can the Dolphins team stay healthy? They don't have any running backs really outside of Raheem Mostert, with Jeff Wilson and David Achi on the IR, and Jalen Waddle struggling with fitness over the last few games. So they've been relying heavily on Tyreek Hill. Then you have the Battle of New York, Jets versus Giants. Both teams been very inconsistent this season. I like the Giants slightly just because if the Jets are missing key players on the defense like Sauce and CJ Mosley, they'll struggle. But the Giants have looked pretty good the last couple of weeks. Tyrod Taylor, a very good fill-in for Daniel Jones, which this is Daniel Jones' job still. Him being injured has nothing to do with Tyrod taking over the starter. Daniel Jones will return as the starting quarterback. But he's played absolutely great. He showed why he's one of the best backups in this league. But I like the Giants in this one. Zach Wilson is just very inconsistent. He's not the best quarterback. And the Jets are just in panic mode at the moment. And then next game is the Steelers versus Jaguars, which both teams are 4-2 and 5-2 respectively, which did not see coming. I like the Jaguars in this, but don't count out the Steelers. The Steelers defense has been unbelievable over the last few weeks against Baltimore and against Los Angeles last week. I like the Jaguars in this. I just think Trevor Lawrence the offense is way better. Travis Etienne has been on fire the last few games, doing it both on the running and in the pass game, which I love to see. What we saw of him at Clemson. It's really, we're getting to see a lot of what we saw at Clemson because we didn't get to see it the first year when he got injured. So I like the Jaguars in that one. Falcons, Titans. Titans will probably end up losing this game if they don't have Ryan Tannehill because we've seen what Malik Willis did last year, and this is a new thing for Will Levis. So I feel like the Titans will struggle. A lot of Titans could be on the move in the next few weeks with the trade deadline next week on October 31st. Could Derrick Henry be done as a Tennessee Titan come next week? We'll find out. Next game, it's the battle of the top two quarterbacks from last year's draft in Texans, C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young of the Carolina Panthers. Look for the Texans to dominate this game. I just don't see Carolina being a good team. Bryce Young has struggled to keep hold of the ball and to protect the ball, with C.J. Stroud barely throwing he has one interception this year. It took him through 7 weeks before he got one. So look for the Houston Texans to bounce back to look good after a bye week that they're coming off of, and Carolina to struggle again. And then you have two good defense going up against each other, the Rams and the Cowboys. I do not like any of their matchups in fantasy, so look to avoid them. I do like the Cowboys in this because I think the Rams offense isn't If you watched last game against the Steelers, they looked shaken by a good defense. They were inconsistent, couldn't get really anything going, which I think was a contribute to what the Steelers defense was doing. So look for the Cowboys to take advantage of that. Vikings Packers struggles from Jordan Love again, which it's his first season starting. I don't think people should get overwhelmed that Jordan Love is going to go as having these issues, because every young quarterback goes through these issues and struggles throughout his career. Don't give up on him just yet. But I do like Minnesota. What we saw out of them last night against San Francisco was big, intercepting Brock Purdy twice. Jordan Addison stepping up big in the absence of Justin Jefferson. Kirk Cousins looking unbelievable. He's looked good all season. It's just his team cannot get wins. The defense stepped up big time. Cameron Byron, Ivan Pace, Darrell Hunter, they all stepped up big. The next game, Saints and Colts. I like to say into this, pretty much the Colts just have looked not good this year. Michael Pittman has just been frustrated with the offense, not getting as many looks as targets that he should be. They went really to Josh Downs pretty much most of the game, and then relied heavily on the run game between Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor, which I see continuing throughout the season, because Zach Moss is really good and just always Jonathan Taylor. So you can't. And Zach Moss has been hot pretty much all season, so I wouldn't want to take the ball out of his hands, but you have to give the ball to Jonathan Taylor, so you have to split the time, which they did. They both had 18 carries, both for about 75, 78 yards, respectively, for both. And the next game is the Eagles Commanders, which one team just made a great accusation in getting Kevin Byard to boast the Eagles secondary, which I love that, because they needed that since they've lost so many safeties over the last few years to injury. And this year with injuries, and last year losing C.J. Johnson, Chauncey Gardner, to name a few, and then Kayvon Wallace as well. And then there's the Commanders, who are on the other side. Like, they're probably going to be sellers at the deadline. Look for Mo Sweat and Chase Young to be traded at the deadline, because they both haven't lived up to the hype that they were getting out of college. Injuries, yes, didn't help, because they both missed a lot of time due to injuries with being out a full season. But they haven't picked up for where they left off in college, which I know college and NFL football is totally different. It's 100% different. But when you spend a top 10, top 15, top 5 draft pick on these guys, they need to produce. And we haven't seen that from Chase Young or most of it. We saw that when they declined the 5th-year options for them. And they're really far away from negotiations. So look for them to be sellers at the deadline, depending on how these next this game goes, because the trade deadline is coming up soon. Then we have the Browns, Seahawks. Seahawks, take the Seahawks. But, if Myles Garrett has another monster game that he had, especially this close to Halloween, I would be scared if I'm Geno Smith. But they have no offense without Deshaun Watson. But they really didn't have one to begin with. Most of their offense ran through Nick Chubb, which is gone. You have Jerome Ford, who's been a good replacement for him, but he gets injured, and then you rely on Kareem Hunt, who hasn't really played this season because he wasn't on the team until a few weeks ago. And then, like I mentioned, Amari Cooper was not involved. I believe he was targeted like 8 times and had 2 receptions for 22 yards, and his longest catch was in the fourth quarter at the end of the game when they were driving down against the Colts. But get Cooper more involved. He's your best weapon on the offense. Without Nick Chubb being there, use him. But that means Deshaun Watson needs to stay healthy, because they look like a totally different team without him there, with PJ Walker or DTR. So definitely, hopefully Deshaun Watson's back, and then their offense can get better, because their defense is there. They have a really good defense in the likes of Zadarius Smith and Myles Garrett being there, because they put pressure on Gardner Minshew to force that fumble at the end of the game. Myles Garrett had an unbelievable game, so look for him to continue that. You have the Ravens Cardinals later on, which obviously the Ravens destroyed the Lions. They look unbelievable. Lamar Jackson had an unbelievable game. Look to continue that against the Cardinals. Chiefs Broncos, not much to say. The Chiefs will win this game 100%. Denver has struggled all season. 2-5. Look for a fire sale at the end of the season, because there's definitely could happen with Jerry Jeudy, Patrick Surtain, just to name a few, could be on their way out. Javonte Williams, they might be on their way out come October 31st. We got my Bengals coming off the bye week against the 49ers, potential Super Bowl matchup at the beginning of the season. Hopefully, it could still be one if the Bengals kind of go on a run like we've seen before. And then the Niners, they're on a 2-game losing streak. Something's going on with the Niners. They don't have that versatility anymore right now without Deebo Samuels creating pressure, taking pressure off of Christian McCaffrey and Brandon Ayuk, and Brock Purdy being that, and Greg Kittle being that safety blanket for them to create schemes and create mismatch plays and matchups against other teams, because they had all those players and weapons to use. But without Debo, it kind of hinders. You have to rely more on an Ayuk or a Kittle or a McCaffrey. And Brock Purdy has struggled over the last couple games. And then the night game, which I'm shocked this is a night game, the Bears versus the Chargers. Both teams struggling. No Justin Fields probably again for the Bears. And then Justin Herbert needs to pick it up. He's looked good this season. It's just the defense isn't holding up. You spend so much money on Joey Bosa, on Derwin James, on Khalil Mack, and you're 2-4, and you're not getting as much pressure. You're not forcing turnovers as much. They're struggling on the defense stuff. They got rid of J.C. Jackson, which a shocker, because he was about a year before he came to the Chargers. He was unbelievable. Him and Asante Samuel Jr. great pairing and the cornerback position, but you don't. But they get rid of J.C. Jackson. They don't have that depth anymore. They don't have that. It doesn't look like they have the fight right now, which they need to pick it up. This could be Brandon Staley's last year in Los Angeles. I could see them firing him at the end of the season. And then the Monday night game, you have the Lions Raiders, which I think Lions will bounce back against the Raiders. The Raiders just aren't as good of a team. We're seeing them struggle with Josh Jacobs and Devontae Adams voicing their frustrations at the organization. Jimmy Garoppolo is definitely not the answer. He is a stopgap before they get a new quarterback, which I think they will go out and get Drake May if they can, or someone else in the draft this year, or a Quinn Ewers or a Bo Nix. Jimmy Garoppolo, he's just that stopgap, but we'll see what happens come time to that. And then, like I mentioned, the trade deadline's coming soon. There are so many. These are the 32 people that I think could get traded, and some rumors. They're saying that the Raiders won't trade Devontae Adams before the deadline, but you never know. Nothing could happen. Because Saquon could be traded at the deadline. We already seen the likes of McCole Hardman and Kevin Byard being traded already before the deadline to the Eagles and to the Chiefs, respectively. I think McCole Hardman back to the Chiefs is a good weapon for Patrick Mahomes, because not a lot of these receivers that they had on the roster at the time haven't really played with Mahomes, and McCole Hardman has played with Mahomes multiple times. He's won 2 Super Bowls together, so we'll look to see them do that. As well as the Panthers are looking to trade Terrence Marshall Jr. away. He just hasn't really fit in with the team. Like he hasn't been on the field as much, but they are looking for trades, but they will take him back and use him if they can, if they don't end up finding a trade partner. But here are 32 players that I think could be traded at this deadline. And we can do it for each team. I think, and we'll start with the East. Neville Gallimore, I think they bring in Mozzie Smith, and you see Fakoa, who's going to be back soon. I think Neville Gallimore is set to be a free agent, so they're going to try to get rid of him for some picks before he leaves for free. Then you have the Giants with Saquon. I don't think Saquon gets traded. I think they try to do something in the offseason as a contract negotiation. I don't see them trading him. I think it would be a very bad idea for the Giants. For the Eagles, Rashad Penny. It's just a running back by committee, and I just think he's fallen down the depth charts with DeAndre Swift and Kenneth Gainwell being there. So look to see that trade. I've already talked about the Commanders. For the Bears, Jalen Johnson, I think he's in the final year of his deal. He's going to want the extension. I think you can get something out of him. He's young. He's a very good um, cornerback, but also I can see them trading safety Eddie Jackson and going more of a youth player, going youthful, because they could probably get more draft picks out of those because outside of the top two picks in the draft that they own, they don't really have much else later on. So you could see getting more picks. And then for Detroit, Marvin Jones Jr., I could see getting traded. Just with all the weapons coming back, he's just kind of inexpensible. And then for the Green Bay, you have Preston Smith, who I think is the odd man out. Um, he's been very good this season, but you have your younger veterans of Rashawn Gary and Lucas Van Ness that you drafted last year, who are on cheaper deals. Well, Rashawn Gary is on a big, massive deal, but you have Ness on a cheap deal, a rookie deal, which you could move Preston Smith. You've already seen them get rid of Zadarius Smith already. In a trade in cuts. So look to see them. And then the obvious one in Minnesota is Daniel Hunter, who is looking. They did do well, he's more looking to go to a team that he can play in his correct system. He is um, a three. He's more of a 3-4 outside linebacker more than a 4-3 end, which I think also and the money. He's one of the best pass rushers, edge rushers in the game, and I think they're undervaluing him. And then for the Falcons, I think it's one of their receivers. After acquiring Van Jefferson, one of their receivers are probably going to get traded. If Carolina keeps losing, look at Dante Jackson. They've moved Jeremy Chin more into that corner nickelback / linebacker role, but he could also be on his way out. Brian Burns could be also on his way out if they don't come up with a trade and maybe get more draft picks to surround Bryce Young. To just name a few. Mike Evans probably for Tampa Bay. I don't know if they change anything up at the deadline. I don't think anything will happen. Same with the Cardinals. I could see the Niners and the Dolphins going after more of a backup running back role to help because they have running backs that get injured a lot. And then I think for the Patriots, they have three good tight ends. I think one of them could be traded if that is Farrell Brown or Mike Gesicki because you have Hunter Henry who plays most of your snaps, and most of these guys are on 1-year deals, which could be inexpensible for the long run. And then we come to the Jets. The Jets, I think, will be big sellers at the deadline just because of where they're at right now, just because the season's pretty much gone with Aaron Rodgers going down. So look to see Carl Lawson being traded. I know he was a big prize from Cincinnati in 2021, but you have so many defensive ends and John Franklin Myers, Jeremiah Johnson, Bryce Huff. You have so many. He's just falling down the pecking order, and they're going with more of that youthfulness of the team. Bengals. I'm sad to say it, but it could be T. Higgins. If they do look to trade someone, T. Higgins could be the odd man out because they could not come to terms with a long-term deal. They still have Jamar Chase. They still have Ty Boyd under contract, or Tyler Boyd could be the one that gets traded and they re-sign T. Higgins. But you never know what could happen in Cincinnati. Pittsburgh look to see them upgrade their offensive line even more. I think they go more with Broderick Jones starting for the rest of the year, so that makes Dan Moore the odd man out, and I think that's a good idea to replace him. Like I mentioned, Denver could be very active. They say they're not actively looking, but definitely could see trades happening. And then with Vegas and Kansas City, I could see Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Hunter Renfrow from both teams being traded. I think they're in it. We saw Clyde Edwards-Helaire drafted as he's supposed to be the next big running back out of LSU on that team that won the national championship. They declined this 5th-year option, which he has struggled over the years to stay healthy since he's been in the league to stay healthy. And he lost his starting spot to Isaiah Pacheco and Jerick McKinney. And then the same thing as well with Hunter Renfrow. He lost his spot pretty much from Trey Tucker coming in, Devontae Adams coming in, Jacoby Myers as well. Um, One that I think is out there is that could happen is a trade with Tennessee. Derrick Henry could be on his way out in Tennessee. We've already seen them trading Kevin Byard away. We could see Derrick Henry on the move. We could see Terrell Tart, the defensive tackle, also on the way out. So you never know what's going to happen in the NFL with so many trades. And like I mentioned, you talk about Miles. You talk about the trade deadline coming up. With like I mentioned, Kevin Byron was traded earlier. We've seen J.C. Jackson, Cam Akers, Chase Claypool, or Andrew Gregory, just to name a few, already being traded. And in this Kevin Byron trade, they also traded Terrell Edmonds, a 4th-round pick, and a 6th-round pick, both in 2024. I think that's a good move for Tennessee because they're kind of like at that purgatory stage. Like they're not good, but they're not great. They're not a terrible team, but they will make the playoffs, but they won't go farther than the wild card probably. And then this helps the Eagles on the defensive side. You lose Reed Blankenship to injury. You lose Justin Evans to the IR. So you need someone to play safety because you have no one. Terrell Evans has not really lived up to the hype which they brought him in for. And you bring in a ball hawk like Kevin Byron. Kevin Byron is also get cheap wise because he's about 2.4 million and remaining in the salary in 2023, and then he's got 13.6 million non-guaranteed for 2024, and he's 30. So they might not want to pay that price next year depending on how he does this season. So there is an out in that situation. But he is really good. He is a 2-time all-pro team. He has 2 Pro Bowls. He's one of the best ball hawks in the game. I believe he has 27 interceptions in his career. So I would definitely think that he's a very stronger upgrade from Terrell Edmonds, and it can help with that back on the backside with Darius Slay and James Bradbury, who are 2 lockdown corners who are in their 30s and still locked down. So definitely look at that aspect of the trade. And there could be so many trades throughout this leading up to the trade deadline. I feel like there's going to be a lot of moves coming up in this year's deadline on October 31st. So, yeah, that kind of wraps up our episode today of NFL football podcast edition. So, definitely check us out on Spotify and watch us on YouTube and turn those notifications on so you don't miss a minute of any episode. And then like and subscribe on Twitter and Instagram. And we will be releasing this episode, our college football, our soccer, and our college basketball and our NBA in the next couple of days. So peace, and we'll see you soon.